social sphere and liberal values that I want to talk about, which is the role of caste. Now, what role do liberal values play in the operation of caste? Now, caste, I believe, is in many ways coterminous with class and coterminous with social inequality. And social inequality is brutal in India today, and these inequalities express themselves along caste lines, there is no doubt about that. Are quotas the best way to deal with caste inequalities? In this, I want to read out another liberal thinker by the name of Minoo Masani. Reservations or quotas should not last for more than 10 years, but the device has become a habit. Every 10 years, Parliament prolongs its life because by now the spokespersons of reservations have become a vested interest. This has become one of the main points of corruption in public life and an easy way to professing to provide social justice. Rajagoapalchari says, statutory and other concessions given for the uplift of backward elements are prescribed on the basis of caste. This is basically erroneous procedure, being in conflict with the no caste ideology of the nation. Caste-wise approach should be given up and a secular economical test substituted for all caste assistance and caste concessions. If the individual should be benefited by a subsidy or a concession on account of his caste, it becomes a new privilege, which is not good policy to create or perpetuate. So the liberal thinking on caste is that there should be affirmative action. There should be affirmative action to bring in the less privileged into the educational mainstream. But let this affirmative action be on the basis of economics and not on the basis of caste identity entirely. Because if it is on the basis of caste identity, it becomes a privilege. And once it becomes a privilege, then identity kicks in, and that identity itself and identity politics becomes its own privilege. A much better example of the fight against caste inequality is, I think, being waged by the Dalit Bahujan thinker Chandrabhan Prasad, who has taken advantage of market opportunities and of individual enterprise, individual innovativeness, individual action in the market of what he calls Dalit capitalists, and they are taking advantage of their talents, they're taking advantage of their social businesses, they're taking advantage of their own skills to create products for the market and thereby using the market to empower themselves. In this sense, I believe that empowering through the market is a better way to go than seeking statutory concessions from the state. Having said that, I do believe that the Dalit counterculture, the Dalit critique of caste Hindu society, the Dalit critique of brahmanical society is an enormously powerful one. This has to be embraced by us. Every liberal must embrace the Dalit critique because notions of purity and pollution, as Louis Dumont reminds us in Homo Hierarchicus, that the Hindu Brahmanical culture is centered on purity and pollution. And this is a tremendously brutalizing principle on those considered impure. We've seen the plight of manual scavengers. I also spoke recently about the impurity of the menstruating women. So we have to think and introspect on notions of purity and pollution. And in this sense, the Dalit counterculture, the Dalit critique of caste Hindu society is very important. Kancha Elia Shepherd has done incredible work in questioning caste Hindu texts. For example, he believes we should rewrite the Purusha Sukta. The Purusha Sukta is the Vedic hymn by which it is said that certain castes come from certain parts of the cosmic body. The Brahmin comes from the head, the Kshatriya comes from the neck, etc. So this has to be rewritten. Rohit Vemula, the student who committed suicide in Hyderabad University, his suicide note, I believe, should be read by liberals to see the kind of cry for equality that exists out there. So the Dalit counterculture and Dalit critique of caste Hindu society, I believe, must become a part of the liberal thinking on individual freedom. Let's now talk about liberal values and the sphere of emotions, and how liberal articulations of emotions are possible in India and to what extent they are curtailed. Now, an extremely significant moment for liberal values in India, I believe, was when the Supreme Court struck down Section 377, criminalizing gay freedoms, criminalizing gay sex. Now, on September 6, 2018, the Supreme Court struck down 377, the colonial era law that criminalized consensual adult homosexual sex. Now, I'll read out a bit from this judgment because I think it is very important, and this judgment, I believe, is a very important moment for liberal values and for individual freedom. The court said, Section 377 is irrational, indefensible, and arbitrary. The majoritarian views and popular morality cannot dictate constitutional rights. Now, the reason why this judgment has wide implications for liberal freedoms lies in the manner in which the apex court strongly laid down the difference between majoritarian views and constitutional rights. So, the majority morality may be one thing. Majority view may believe that gay rights are not a part of Indian culture, that gay sex or homosexual sex should not be part of Indian culture. But what the Supreme Court laid down here was that there is the concept of constitutional rights. And the constitutional rights, even if they go against the popular morality, even if they go against the majoritarian ethic, constitutional rights have to be honored. And I think this is where the Supreme Court struck a real blow, in fact, upheld individual freedom, in that it upheld constitutional rights. Now, homosexual sex has had a long tradition in India, and I believe that this is one aspect of Indian cultural life which is certainly not foreign to India. It's certainly not in any way an alien import. If you see the love poem of Madho and Mahmud, there in fact it is a 17th century love poem which talks about the love of two men. So Justice A.P. Shah, who in fact gave that important judgment on Section 377 to the Delhi High Court, has actually quoted this poem, this love poem of Madho, to show how gay sex and homosexual sex has been long a part of Indian social life. Now, what does liberalism, what does liberty mean in India, what does individual freedom mean in India? Above all, it means the right to not only to pursue business, not only to pursue individual self-interest, but also the right to love, the right to eat, the right to drink, the right to speak, the right to marry who you want to, the right to think what you want to, the right to read what you want to, the right to write what you want to. So these personal freedoms are fundamental to the Indian liberal experience and what it means to be an Indian liberal. Now, when in 2017 the government arbitrarily and suddenly banned the sale and slaughter of livestock or cattle in agricultural markets, there I believe again it was arbitrary state action which actually harmed the fundamental right to eat. Now, there are many states in India where beef eating is part of the diet. In Kerala, Hindus eat beef. In the northeast, beef eating is common. In many parts of India, there are Hindu communities who consume beef. Now, when the government took out this law, this 2017 cattle slaughter law, banning cattle slaughter law, or banning trade of cattle in markets law, I believe it was arbitrary big state action against the individual right to eat. What about the violence that was created by this law? After the enunciation of this law, we had the rise of the lynchings, which took place against so-called cattle smugglers. We had students participating in beef festivals who were then attacked. We had violence on communities which were apparently trading in cattle or trading in cows. So this was a law that actually struck at the right to livelihood, struck at the right to life, and struck at the right to eat. So this was a moment, I believe, this law, the cattle slaughter laws that the government brought in 2017 was, I believe, a infringement of the fundamental right to eat. Honor killings are common in India. You've had the case of P. Dipti, who was a technical engineer. She was killed by her own parents because she fell in love with someone outside her own caste. Killings of women falling in love with people outside their own caste have happened. Honor killings of brothers killing their own sisters because they've dared to fall in love with someone from another community have also happened. The terrible case of Rizwanur Rahman in Calcutta, who was in fact, we don't know how he actually died, but he was found dead on the railway tracks because he had fallen in love with Priyanka Todi. She, of course, was from a Hindu background and had very powerful, wealthy parents. So, the right to fall in love, does that exist in India? One of the results of a massive state and a big ideological state is that it empowers the non-state actors. It empowers the street goons. It empowers the vigilante armies, the lynch mobs, the morality police, the Romeo squads. These are the result of a massive ideologically driven state. When a state has massive powers and is driven by a particular ideology or is driven by the Hindutva nationalist ideology, it then empowers these street gangs or these gangs of vigilantes or gangs of goons who then stand forth as the so-called spreaders of the ideology of the state. They are the non-state actors who are empowered by the big ideological state. Now these non-state actors are wreaking havoc on individual freedom because the non-state actors can turn up at a wedding and they can disrupt the wedding. The non-state actors can fall upon a girl and a boy who are walking down the street and stop them from holding hands if they're holding hands. The non-state actors can stop, for example, girls and boys sitting in a park on St. Valentine's Day. The non-state actors can wreak havoc on couples sitting in a beach. So these non-state actors, these in UP they're called the Romeo squads. Apparently they're there to stop women from moving around with their boyfriends. How can they do this? By what right does a group have the right to prevent somebody else from holding hands with their loved ones and walking on the street? This is a fundamental infringement of the right to love, and this is exactly what these non-state actors are doing. They're also doing it, for example, with the right to eat or drink. Now, as you know, in 2010, a group of women sitting in a lounge called Amnesia in Mangalore were actually set upon by this group called the Sri Ram Sene. The women were beaten up, they were dragged out of that lounge by their hair, and they were abused for ruining Bharatiya Sanskriti or destroying Indian culture. Now, why is it that women sitting in a bar and having a glass of beer are destroying Indian culture? And who are these vigilante groups to prevent women from doing this? If it is allowed by law, if the women are breaking no law, then how come these vigilante groups are taking it upon themselves to enforce morality and enforce what they believe is Indian culture? Is it Indian culture to beat up a woman? Is it Indian culture to drag a woman out by the hair and scream at her for destroying Bharatiya Sanskriti? I don't think so. So the operations of these vigilante groups or these so-called goon squads or the moral policemen, I believe, is fundamentally destroying the right to love, the right to eat, the right to drink, the right to marry, and the right to associate. In all these spheres, individual freedoms are being jeopardized and being endangered by the goon squads who are empowered by the big ideological state.